Silent Hunters, the Battle of the Atlantic, cold open. It is September 3rd, 1939. The waters off the coast of Ireland are dark. A merchant vessel cuts through the Atlantic swells, her holds filled with grain and machinery bound for Britain. The crew knows the war has begun. They don't know it has already found them. Beneath the surface, 300 meters away, something stirs. A German U-boat, U-30. Her captain, Fritz Julius Lemp, peers through his periscope. He sees the ship. He sees the opportunity. His finger hovers over the firing mechanism. In this moment, on this ordinary September morning, the war beneath the waves begins. A conflict that will stretch across nearly 6 years, consume millions of lives, and decide the fate of nations. The torpedo is launched. It travels through the darkness at 50 kilometers per hour. The crew of the SS Athenia has no warning, no chance to fight back, no escape from the depths. 112 people will die in the next few minutes. They are the first casualties in a battle that most will never see. A war fought by ghosts in iron coffins, battling each other in an abyss of salt and silence. This is their story. Act 1, The World Before. To understand how the Atlantic became a graveyard, we must first understand what it meant to control it. Before the war, before the submarines, the ocean was a highway. It connected Britain to the world. Wheat from Canada, oil from America, rubber from Malaya, tin from Bolivia, coffee from Brazil. The British Empire depended on these lifelines, these fragile threads of commerce that stretched across thousands of kilometers of open water. Britain in 1939 was a nation that could not feed itself. It could not arm itself. Everything, nearly everything, had to come from abroad. The island nation had 7 weeks of food reserves. 7 weeks between normalcy and starvation. This was Winston Churchill's greatest fear as he assumed power in May of 1940. Not the Wehrmacht rolling across France, though that terrified him. Not the Luftwaffe bombing London, though that too was coming. No, Churchill's deepest dread was this: the slow strangling of his nation. Death by isolation. Germany understood this perfectly. Adolf Hitler knew he could not invade Britain successfully. The Royal Navy was still formidable, but he could starve her into submission. He could wage war on commerce. He could send his submarines into the Atlantic and sink every ship that crossed it. This was the theory of tonnage warfare, a brutal calculus in which submarines would destroy merchant shipping faster than it could be replaced. Sink enough vessels and Britain would have no choice but to surrender. The man who would orchestrate this strategy was Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz. A U-boat commander himself in the First World War, Dönitz understood submarines with an almost religious fervor. He had a vision. He believed that submarines could win the war. Not battleships, not aircraft, submarines. He called them the deadliest weapons ever created, and he was willing to prove it. But in 1939, Dönitz faced a problem. Germany did not have enough submarines, not nearly enough. The Treaty of Versailles after the First World War had forbidden Germany from building them entirely. Hitler had repudiated that treaty, of course, but Germany was years behind in submarine construction. Dönitz had perhaps 60 submarines in commission. He needed 200, he needed 300. He would have to be patient, and he would have to be ruthless. The submarines he did possess were formidable machines. The Type 7C U-boat was 7.6 meters long, displaced 761 tons, and carried 14 torpedoes. A crew of 44 men lived in those tubes of steel, packed so tightly that when one man stood, another had to sit. The air grew thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and the smell of bilge. The noise was constant, the hum of electric motors, the tick of instruments, the hiss of compressed air. Men went mad in these vessels. Some simply stopped eating. Others developed sores that would not heal. But they also possessed something else: courage, daring, a willingness to dive into darkness. On the British side, Admiral Sir Percy Noble commanded the Western Approaches Command from Liverpool. He was a careful man, methodical. He believed in convoys, the ancient practice of grouping merchant ships together under the protection of naval escorts. Warships and armed trawlers would shepherd dozens of merchant vessels across the Atlantic, forming a floating fortress. It was the logical response to the U-boat threat. But in 1940 and 1941, Britain did not have enough escorts. There were gaps in the ocean where no protection existed. vast stretches of the mid-Atlantic where submarines could hunt unopposed. These gaps were called the Black Pit, and they were precisely where Donitz sent his wolves. AC-2, the storm. The year 1940 arrives, and the storm begins. France falls in 6 weeks. Dunkirk is evacuated. Britain stands alone, and the U-boats hunt. More of them are commissioned every month. More crews are trained. More captains are sent into the Atlantic with orders to sink everything. In September 1940, U-48 under the command of Kapitänleutnant Herbert Schulze is on patrol in the western approaches. Schulze is calculating. Cold. He has already sunk 19 ships. He knows the patterns of convoy traffic. He knows the weak points in the escort formations. He waits. A convoy emerges from the mist. 13 merchant vessels, 2 escort vessels. The numbers tell him everything he needs to know. He can strike without fear of serious retaliation. The convoy is codenamed SC-7. The 2 escorts are overworked, undermanned, and exhausted. They do not detect U-48 as she slips into the convoy's ranks. Schulze fires his first torpedo. It strikes the SS Glenartney. The ship erupts in flame. The crew abandons her. In the chaos and darkness, Schulze fires again and again. He sinks 5 ships in that single attack. 24 hours later, U-boat reinforcements arrive. By the end of the engagement, 9 ships lie on the bottom of the Atlantic. 65 men have died. SC-7 is annihilated. The losses mount. In October 1940 alone, the Germans sink 58 ships. In November, 106. In December, 134. The arithmetic is relentless. Britain is losing merchant vessels faster than she can replace them. The tonnage warfare strategy is working. Every ship that goes down is food not delivered, ammunition not shipped, fuel not received. England is slowly starving. The ordinary merchant sailors bear the weight of this terror. These are not combat troops. They are men of the merchant marine, often older men, men with families waiting at home. When their ship is torpedoed, they have perhaps 3 minutes to escape. 3 minutes to fight through darkness, to lower lifeboats, to launch rafts. In the winter months, the Atlantic water temperature hovers just above freezing. A man immersed in such water will lose consciousness in minutes. Death follows swiftly after. The survivors drift. They cling to wreckage. Some drift for days before rescue arrives. Many do not survive rescue. The rescue vessels themselves are vulnerable, engaged in their own race against U-boats. Picking up survivors is a dangerous luxury. Ships that stop to rescue drowning men risk being sunk themselves. This knowledge haunts the men at sea. They understand that their death might be slow and solitary, or fast and violent. But death has come for them regardless. In March 1941, a convoy designated HX-112 departs from Halifax, Nova Scotia. 51 merchant vessels, 5 escorts. The ships are bound for Liverpool with vital supplies. The convoy commodore is Captain James Reeves. A veteran sailor, Reeves understands the risks. He arranges his convoy in tight formation. He posts lookouts on every available vantage point. He orders radio silence. But none of this will matter. On March 15th, U-99, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Otto Kretschmer, establishes contact with the convoy. Kretschmer is a legend among U-boat captains. He has sunk 42 ships. He is relentless, intelligent, and utterly devoid of mercy. He sends a signal. Other U-boats close in. Wolf-pack tactics. This is Donitz's innovation. Multiple submarines attacking the same convoy simultaneously, overwhelming the escorts through sheer numbers. The night is dark, the visibility near zero. Kretschmer maneuvers his U-boat into the center of the convoy formation. He is now surrounded by merchant vessels, fat, slow, defenseless targets. He fires his first torpedo. It strikes the HMS Sharpshooter, an armed minesweeper serving as an escort. The ship goes down in minutes. Kretschmer has declared his presence. The battle has begun. What follows is hours of chaos. Explosions light the night sky. Ships burn. Men scream in the darkness. The escorts, desperate and outnumbered, depth charge the water indiscriminately, hoping to hit something, anything. One U-boat is damaged, but it does not matter. The Wolfpack is too coordinated, too disciplined. By dawn, 6 merchant ships lie on the bottom of the Atlantic. 225 men are dead. HX-112 limps into Liverpool with its remaining survivors. Captain Reeves's face is gray with exhaustion and guilt. He could not save them. No captain could have. The mathematical advantage belongs entirely to the submarines. A convoy of 50 ships needs perhaps 5 escorts to have any hope of protection. Britain has perhaps 20 escorts in total across all of the Atlantic. The math is impossible. By the summer of 1941, the crisis deepens. The U-boat fleet has grown to 160 operational submarines. More are sliding down the slipways in German yards every month. The loss rate of merchant shipping climbs toward a catastrophe. In June 1941, the Germans sink 191 ships. The stockpile of British supplies shrinks. Rationing becomes more severe. People go hungry. Ships run aground on unlit coasts because there is no fuel for navigation lights. The nightmare that Churchill fears, the slow strangulation of his nation, is becoming reality. And then, on June 22, 1941, everything changes. Germany invades the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. Hitler turns his gaze eastward. But the U-boat war does not pause. It accelerates. Dönitz, now given the title of Grand Admiral, presses his advantage. The Wolfpack tactics become more sophisticated. Submarines coordinate through radio communications. They shadow convoys for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The escorts are spread so thin that they are almost useless. The Black Pit, that vast mid-Atlantic expanse beyond air cover, becomes a killing ground. In August 1941, 2 American destroyers, the USS Greer and the USS Destroyers, are damaged by U-boats. The United States is not yet in the war, but it is edging closer. President Roosevelt orders American naval vessels to escort convoys as far as Iceland. It is a step toward open conflict. By the autumn of 1941, the Battle of the Atlantic has consumed more than 2,000 ships. Nearly 400 of these are British. The losses equal millions of tons of cargo: food, fuel, aircraft, munitions. The supplies that Britain needs simply are not arriving, and still the U-boats hunt. At 3, the reckoning. December 7th, 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The United States enters the war. Everything changes, though not immediately. America's vast industrial capacity is now committed to the Allied cause, but it will take months for that capacity to translate into ships, escorts, and supplies crossing the Atlantic. In the interim, the situation becomes even more dire. Germany declares war on the United States on December 11th. American merchant ships now become targets. The U-boats move to American waters. Operation Paukenschlag drumbeat. In January 1942, a single U-boat, U-123, sinks 9 ships off the coast of North Carolina. The Americans, shocked and unprepared, watch their merchant fleet burn in sight of the shore. The U.S. Navy has not conducted convoy operations since World War I. The lessons have been forgotten. Ships sail independently. They have no escort. They travel with navigation lights blazing, making them easy targets. U-boats sink 85 ships off the American coast in January 1942 alone. The total for the first few months of American involvement in the war exceeds 300 ships, more tonnage lost in a single quarter than Britain loses in a full year. But slowly, painfully, the Allies begin to learn. Convoys are organized. Escorts increase in number. The British introduce new technology, high-frequency direction-finding equipment that can locate U-boat radio transmissions. They introduce new depth charge patterns, new search procedures. They begin to sink U-boats faster than Germany can build them. The turning point comes in May 1943. Convoy ONS-5, composed of 42 merchant ships and 4 escorts, is shadowed by 5 U-boats. The weather is terrible, visibility near zero, seas running high. The escorts, now including the British sloop HMS Pink, are aggressive and relentless. They depth charge continuously. They ram U-boats that surface. One German captain describes the convoy as the most deadly he has ever encountered. In the space of 48 hours, the escorts sink 4 U-boats. 40 German sailors die. The Wolfpack withdraws. The convoy reaches its destination. ONS-5 is not a military victory in the traditional sense. No battles are fought. No enemy fleet is destroyed. But it marks a turning point. After May 1943, the U-boat commanders know they are no longer hunting. They are being hunted. Dönitz is forced to acknowledge the reality. The U-boat war cannot be won. The Allies have achieved sufficient escort strength to protect their convoys. New radar technology allows escorts to detect submerged submarines. American and British aircraft, flying from bases in Iceland and northern Africa, can now cover the Black Pit with patrol flights, denying the U-boats the surface time they need to recharge batteries and pursue convoys. In September 1943, Dönitz withdraws his U-boats from the main convoy routes. They are no longer capable of operating in the face of Allied escorts. But the submarines do not disappear. They are retrofitted with new weapons, acoustic homing torpedoes that track by sound. They are given new equipment to detect radar. They are pushed into deeper waters where the Allies cannot reach them. But they are no longer an existential threat to Britain. The battle that seemed endless suddenly ends, not with a dramatic finale, but with a grinding attrition. In 1943, the Germans launched 3,000 attacks on convoys. They sink 279 ships, but they lose 86 U-boats. The mathematics have flipped. The hunters are becoming prey. By 1944 and 1945, the U-boat war has become almost irrelevant. Germany's navy has been shattered. The Kriegsmarine is a shell of its former self. But the U-boats continue to operate, continue to sink ships, continue to take losses. Until the very end of the war, they persist in an effort that has become futile. The final statistics are staggering. Between 1939 and 1945, the U-boats sink 3,001 merchant ships and 175 warships. The tonnage lost exceeds 2.5 million tons. Nearly 30,000 merchant sailors die. The U-boat force loses 2,240 men, more than half of the 55,000 Germans who serve on submarines during the war. The submarines themselves, 218 of them, are sunk by Allied escorts, aircraft, and other U-boats. 32 more are captured. 84 are scuttled by their own crews rather than surrender. Only 34 intact U-boats remain when Germany surrenders in May 1945. The victory in the Atlantic is not dramatic. There is no surrender ceremony, no symbolic moment of triumph. It is instead the accumulation of countless small victories. Convoys that reach their destinations, submarines that are sunk, losses that slowly cease to be unsustainable. It is the victory of dogged persistence, of learning from disaster, of adapting tactics and technology under the pressure of necessity. Epilogue. In the summer of 1946, almost a year after the war's end, the British author and historian S.J. Fowler writes, "The Battle of the Atlantic was the dominating factor all through the war. Never for one moment could we forget that everything depended on our ability to feed this island, to import the munitions of war, and to transport our armies across the seas." Churchill would later call it, "the only thing that ever really frightened me during the entire war. Not the threat of invasion, not the bombing, the slow, methodical strangulation of his island by shadows beneath the waves." The U-boat commanders who survived the war carry different memories. Some feel no remorse. Captain Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer, captured in 1941 after his U-boat was sunk, survives the war in a British prisoner of war camp. He is repatriated to Germany in 1947. He never expresses regret for the merchant sailors he killed. He was, he maintained, merely following orders, merely executing the strategy his commander had set. Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz is tried at Nuremberg. He is convicted of war crimes, though not specifically for the U-boat campaign. The tribunal seems uncertain whether merchant sailors count as legitimate military targets. Dönitz receives a 10-year sentence. He is released in 1956. He dies in 1980, still believing that his submarines could have won the war if only he had been given enough of them. The men who died in the Atlantic, they leave different legacies. The merchant sailors, the ordinary sailors, are largely forgotten. Their names are not carved on monuments. There are memorials, yes, in Liverpool and London and Glasgow, but they are small, little visited. The public remembers the naval battles, the sinking of the Bismarck, the Battle of the River Plate. The U-boat war does not capture the imagination in the same way, and yet it killed more men, sank more ships, and determined the outcome of the war as surely as any battle fought on land. The technical innovations born from the battle persisted long after the war ended. Radar, sonar, underwater detection, all refined through the desperate struggle in the Atlantic. The escort carrier, developed to provide air cover for convoys, became a template for the small aircraft carriers that serve navies to this day. The tactics developed, the coordinated escort formations, the use of air power against submarines, the integration of different naval platforms, became the standard playbook for anti-submarine warfare. And the U-boats themselves, once feared as invincible weapons, become museum pieces. A handful survive. The German U-995 is preserved in Labo near Kiel. The British can see inside a U-boat now, can stand where the crews stood, can grasp the claustrophobia, the terror, the grinding monotony of patrol after patrol in the darkness. We live now in a world of cargo ships so massive that a single vessel carries more goods than 100 merchant ships from World War II. These ships travel in peace, largely unguarded, across oceans made safe by technology and international law. We take this for granted. We do not consider what it took to secure these sea lanes. We do not remember the 3,000 ships that went down, or the 30,000 men who died with them. The Battle of the Atlantic was not won by grand strategy or brilliant generalship. It was won by ordinary men, American merchant sailors, British escorts, Canadian corvette captains, American destroyer crews, who endured the fear, the exhaustion, the numbing repetition of convoy after convoy after convoy. It was won by adaptability, by learning from disaster, by refusing to surrender in the face of an enemy that seemed, for years, invincible. The submarines were ultimately defeated not because they were inferior weapons, but because the Allies, through sheer determination, made the Atlantic untenable for them. They turned the hunters into the hunted. They made the U-boats fear the escorts rather than the convoys fearing the submarines. This is the final legacy of the Battle of the Atlantic. Not victory in the dramatic sense, but persistence, adaptation, the slow, grinding accumulation of small advantages until the aggregate becomes decisive. The battle beneath the waves reminds us that wars are not always won by those with the most advanced weapons or the cleverest strategies. Sometimes they are won by those who simply refuse to break, who continue fighting even when success seems impossible, who understand that the price of surrender is far higher than the cost of endurance. The Atlantic is silent now. The ships pass unmolested. The submarines rest on the ocean floor, tombs of corroded steel, housing the remains of men who died in service to their nations. They will rest there forever, undisturbed. A memorial to a battle that most will never know was fought. But their presence beneath the waves, their sacrifice, their legacy, these persist. They shaped the outcome of World War II. They shaped the world we inhabit today. This is the story of the men who fought the battle beneath the waves. This is how the Atlantic was won. This is how Britain survived. And this is why we remember, even when the world forgets.